Hi, NASPA Region 2 colleagues and listeners. Thank you for joining this SASpeaks session. My name is Brian Samble, and I serve as the Assistant Dean of Student Affairs and Deputy Title IX Coordinator here at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I chose to propose today's talk for our region to accomplish two goals. First, to acknowledge the very real challenges our institutions face and emphasize the need for creative approaches now more than ever for how our work is managed. And second, to share a case-in-point example of a new model for student leadership developed here at Franklin and Marshall to accent the design thinking approach we use that folks should apply to any number of programs. We built upon listeners' competencies in the area of organizational and human resources in the areas that job descriptions, staffing patterns, work process configurations, that are needed to seek and attain institutional and divisional goals. The challenges impacting higher education may not be a surprise to many of the folks in our region, particularly among the enrollment pressures that will in turn impact institutional budgets and in turn impact student affairs. Of course, here in the Mid-Atlantic, we have declining numbers of high school graduates that are college ongoing, particularly in our Region 2 states. Reliance even on international students, which many of our institutions have benefited from, are risky right now with diplomatic tensions, and it may not even be the diplomatic tensions as much as some consulates are already closed, and the ability to get a visa may not be as accessible in time for students to join us in the fall. We also are at a time where coronavirus has led to record unemployment and underemployment of parents and families who may be helping their children pay for college. And so with 36 million folks filing for unemployment, that can put pressure on taking a year off or looking at other options and pathways. So COVID-19 itself has put pressures on not only the finances and students who are coming to our campuses, but how we engage them. Will they be wearing masks and gathering in smaller scales and groups due to state orders? How do we institutionally maintain flexibility in transitioning to virtual learning? And as student affairs, where we're used to meeting people in person and organizing programs and activities, how do we continue engagement online? And for students employed on campus who depend on a lot of that money, and many who even send that money home, how do we justify continuity of pay when we transition online? Have we built those positions in ways that can continue services online? So there's a value proposition here for student affairs, a challenge to look at existing programs, which services should be meaningfully streamlined amid these fiscal and human resources challenge, but in a strategic way. How is this actually a moment of opportunity to think differently and creatively and strategically about traditional operations we may have inherited year to year? How do we work smarter, but also how do we stay relevant? This will require the use of design thinking. So the setting in which I'm going to share the example of one approach we're using in this design thinking and innovation in a student leadership program is here at Franklin and Marshall. We're a liberal arts college of 2,400 students. All students, be it first year, sophomore, junior, or senior, are required to live on campus. That's either in our college residence halls or in college-approved properties right on the perimeter of the campus. We have what's known as a college house system as the basis of student life, and that is students immediately upon coming into F&M are a part of a college house. Our admissions officers like to often describe it as Harry Potter-esque, in that they are all part of one of 5 college houses, and that is their identity from when they enter the college to when they graduate. Of course, they have other identities in athletics, in theater, in any number of clubs, activities, and leadership roles and Greek life, but the house system is sort of one unique feature that will play into this program. As well as the Dean of Students area in the Office of Student Affairs, really leading orientation, residential programs, conduct, advising many different student government associations, each of them sort of having their own case manager as well as a college case manager, and deans serving as secondary academic advisors with the faculty. So in many ways, it's unique, and I should mention it here, that the functional areas are not siloed to different offices across a division or between divisions. Many of those are within the same office, so it removes a lot of silos and red tape that could slow some of these processes down. We did have some challenges with existing leadership positions and finding the right balance. As many of you have on your campuses, we had, of course, orientation leaders, resident assistants, for those of you with housing operations. We also had peer mentors. At some points, we had one of these roles, two of them, or all three of them running. But they were three different roles. So they had separate trainings. They had their own job descriptions. They had their own hiring processes. Collectively, it was a lot of students with high turnover, and none of these roles really paid too well. So it led to difficulty retaining the most talented, because great people would take these roles on, and then of course other offices would steal them, or they'd be able to work other jobs, and this was not something they could just volunteer for if they had to make ends meet. The last iteration of this role, which we looked at as we began to craft and ideate and think about how this could look different, was a role called house advisor. Popular at institutions with house systems, but it was essentially an orientation leader who remained on the residence hall floors throughout the year. We had a lot of them. There were about 100. They each received a $1,200 room credit, and they were paired with incoming students, basically on a 1-to-8 ratio. So very small, very personalized, which was in keeping with sort of the high touch expectation of the college. But because of many of those factors in job descriptions and fatigue and turnover rates, we were concerned about quality. We were concerned about, the time we'd have to supervise these folks, and what could be a different approach. And so we thought, what would happen if we combined all of these positions into one super student leader? That from when the moment a student comes to college, the person that's there greeting them as an orientation leader and walking them through getting situated in their classes and campus life is the same person that lives on the floor, is the same person that plans programs, it's the same person that's organizing events, activities, and holding them accountable as sort of that older brother or sister who speaks to them but also knows them, and then mentoring them, that they're making meaningful connections and developing a sense of belonging. So we began looking at our peer group. We began with assessment. Conducting a benchmark study with the Centennial Conference here in Region 2, the Pennsylvania Consortium of Liberal Arts, also here in Region 2. We looked at their student leadership roles. We pulled position descriptions, as well as inquired from staff at those institutions what the compensation was for those roles. Our goal was to ask, what could we craft that kept the best aspects of our existing role, but also pieced together sort of a puzzle, better than a Frankenstein experiment example, but I'll say pieced together in a puzzle, the best parts of those roles at so many other impeccable institutions. And of course, we didn't take all of them, but we looked to see what would match our culture, what made sense, how would they work together. Of course, this was a lot of job responsibilities. We went from about a paragraph 2 or 3 to 3 pages of a job description. There were more responsibilities, there were more hours. What would it cost to attract the most talented students at the college to fill these roles? We would want folks to raise the bar on GPA, near perfect records in behavior, and that spark of grit, of leadership, of positivity, and emotional intelligence that we could trust with almost any task across a wide variety of functional areas. And how do we pay for it without adding to the operational budget and asking for more resources? How do we make this revenue neutral at the least? So part of this was like baking a cake. 3 traditionally separate student leadership roles all wrapped into one. First layer, orientation leader. Second layer, resident assistant. Third layer, peer mentor. I know the picture of the carrot cake is probably making a lot of people hungry. If carrot cake's not your thing, think chocolate, vanilla, but sorry to put this picture up. You may want to put an order in for carrot cake at this point, but I'm just going with this as my example. First layer, orientation leader. Every incoming student is assigned to an HA. We knew that we were going to cut staff sizing down from 100. That ended up then being cut to about 50. So the ratio changed, but it didn't change remarkably so. The ratio is still maintained at 1 to 18 for every orientation group. 1 HA, 18 incoming students. The HAs would greet students when they arrive on campus, be there for orientation, but then live on the residence hall floors with their same group for the duration of the year. They're responsible, of course, during orientation, as all orientation leaders are, for leading students through orientation, debriefing sessions, having continuous team building activities, and that they're responsible for also academic tours, walking students to their academic buildings, having students pull out their class schedules and walking them to the classes their first week to help make sure they make that connection and accent the importance and partnership our student affairs division has with academic affairs, and that their academic success is greatly supported by success outside the classroom. The second layer, of course, is the resident assistant. This role transitions from orientation to then plan intentional community building activities throughout the year. They also, throughout the first few weeks, each week take their orientation group to have meals in the dining hall on campus. And while that might wear after the first few weeks, it's at least foundational to building relationships, again, with their house advisor, but also among the other people. So now it's the introduction to other people on the floors through programming, through meals together, but also planning outings. They're often planning outings to local neighborhood, entertainment, when the campus is too much. What are other venues for people to find? Uphold community standards. So they do enforce policy, they report violations, and they collaborate with campus safety. But it's oftentimes much more easy of a conversation having that relationship in place since orientation. There's not an orientation leader who does one thing and an RA who does another. They're one and the same. And then there's move-out processes and other housing-related tasks. And then, of course, the third layer, the peer mentor. So we know that one element of retention I've been working at institutions of 30,000 students as well as 2,400. One common denominator, and what I've seen from peers, is that the students who oftentimes are not retained are the ones without a sense of belonging, regardless of institutional type. Financial reasons are oftentimes short-term. So thinking about sense of belonging, tied to retention, tying to persistence, tying to graduation, and those importance of those first 6 weeks, the HAs have structured one-on-one meetings with their residents. They organize events to support helping to cheer on other students who may be on other floors. So if they're playing a sport, they may be making a sign for them and cheering for them in the stands, going to orchestra performances or theater performances, walking students to club fairs to help get them connected to ongoing club activities with other peer groups, again, beyond their residence halls, beyond their orientation groups, and to areas of interest to help bolster their network. They also receive exceptional training to respond to students who exhibit any type of behavioral concerns throughout the year. So there are 7 of us in the dean's office who are training them for a week or two alongside health services, counseling services. Our college is fortunate to have a wonderful care coordinator, case manager, who's a professional who also helps walk through these students through concerning behaviors. And all we teach is also comes down to how do you report, how do you filter these, and it goes to our care team, which filters through our Dean of Students office. So there's an awareness of health and wellness and care that is at the crux of a lot of these conversations. So as they notice people and they get to know them and see what's off their baseline, they're able to then report those for us to intervene. They're also trained by our bias response team, as well as go through extensive diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So what were our achievements after this? We took a risk, a big one, and just sort of ripped the Band-Aid off after doing I'd say more calculated risk after doing our research. What we noticed was the staff size was reduced from 100 to 55. Made it more manageable to supervise, to invest, to have performance reviews, not only once, but twice a year. More competitive. We attracted students with much higher GPAs. We had far fewer terminations, and we had a far higher annual staff return. Our staff retention rate was hovering around 50% year to year. Staff reductions from 100 to 55 resulted in turning formerly single rooms that those folks were occupying to then double rooms. So there was a demand at the college to live on campus because the campus rates were a little bit more affordable. And so what we now did was open up all these beds for people off campus, paying maybe independent landlords, even though it's approved housing, to then live on campus. And that helped the bottom line. That also meant because they were living on campus, they were buying meal plans, which the college also got a percent of. So what we saw was a significant revenue generation that had not been possible before. So because we turned many of those rooms into doubles, we brought more people onto campus. Also, the stipends we were giving the other 45 individuals was then consolidated and used as a base in the salaries for this new model. So what we did was actually create a revenue positive approach. And we created a $7,300 base stipend, a six-fold increase in compensation for anyone serving in this role. It became the highest student position paid on campus. They also, in the old model, had to pay for a single room at the single room rate. Now we charge them a double room rate for a single room for the rooms that they did occupy. That led to $600 in savings per year, approximately. We then wanted to bolster retention year to year. Remember, that was an initial problem. And so in the new model, we offered bonuses. Every returner would get $300. And if you were a returner and a head HA, you would receive an additional $400. So if you were a returner and a head HA, you could receive $8,000. So what was part of this model really built on? As we looked at our student leadership positions, we saw three things in common. Consolidation of leadership roles into one sort of super leader position. This is the college house advisor. It came to attract the most talented students who performed exceptionally well in their academic classes, but also made wise decisions outside of the classroom and were good role models. And we offered high compensation to keep them, to get them in and to keep them. And so when we think about our programs, how many programs do we have just a lot of students for that some of those could be combined? And can we combine the budgets to make those far more attractive for people to take on and accept so that we don't lose some of the best folks who may not be doing it, who maybe it's because of the money and taking other jobs. So again, we may only have so many people on campus who can do this role at the caliber we're looking for. So it's important to look at all three of those together. Not only that, but again, not revenue neutral, but revenue positive. The additional revenue was used to support a $1 an hour wage increase for all student positions on campus to raise the minimum. The HAs were also not allowed to hold any other position on campus because there was a demand for work-eligible students, need-aided, to find positions, and they just weren't there, and HAs were working those jobs too. So now the HAs really were able to focus solely on their jobs unless they had a graduate program, pre-professional program. They weren't allowed to even work off campus. And so this freed up the employment for those other students, and it maintained our college house advisors focus on their role. We actually calculated the salary so that even if they maxed out hours based on the campus, we were still above that. So we removed any incentive to work other jobs. The head HA position was also created as we thought about retention to allow this early leader to form. And in the last year, some of those folks were actually brought to campus. Some of the house advisors brought to campus early to function how larger schools use a graduate assistant to help plan orientation. We had undergrads who were in this role helping to do that for us, that 10,000-foot view. And so here's a picture of my house advisor staff. You see at Franklin and Marshall, each assistant dean is also dean of a college house. In my case, it's Brooks College House. Have some pride there. But I also work with 4 other college houses and amazing assistant deans who helped kind of craft this role as we looked at it as a team and built this really special program. And so every one of these college houses has a team of advisors who can fill these roles and sort of move our programs forward. The implications, though, for these unexpected challenges, these black swan events of COVID-19 and moving folks online, we realized how valuable it is in payoff at this moment. Following spring break, of course, on our campuses, the vast majority of students transitioned home to complete courses online. This created an unexpected opportunity. We had college house advisors who were cross-functionally trained in a whole variety of areas and had these long-term existing relationships with the students, so they kept them engaged. Group meets, text messages, video calls, Google Hangouts, meetups, that changed as this changed. So they kept them engaged. But then the college did something remarkable that I haven't seen at any other institution, and that's they paired a professional staff member with any student at the college. Lived on campus, off campus, first year, senior, everyone was paired with a professional staff member. But of course, these staff members may not have known the students. They may have had questions about, how do I communicate with Generation Z? You know, I'm a millennial, and there are changes, you know, with Generation Z on how they prefer to communicate. And so we paired house advisors as a division with each of these professional staff members to help back them up and give them advice, and help also those professional staff members who may be functional area experts and not generalists understand room selection processes, or move-out processes, or course registration processes. That's important to remember. Students were registering for courses at this time, as well as selecting their rooms. A lot of stress, so these folks helped. And also, if someone was overly stressed, they could easily help refer to the care team. But the implications of moving online led to this being one of the only student positions that was funded throughout May, throughout finals and the close of the year. They were that valuable. Thinking about our student leadership positions, how are they trained to transition online in unexpected environments? So the lessons learned, to wrap up this SA Speaks, is how do we apply design thinking to think different about how work is developed in a job description, tasks are organized to be accomplished, and also be flexible to realities and still want to meet institutional goals. So where can we make meaningful mergers? You know, there's going to be risk, but hopefully that's calculated. So how do we conduct assessments and work with our peers and colleagues in Region 2 to see how we can achieve our shared goals? Can we look at our budgets and not ask for more, but ask how can we collaborate, be entrepreneurial, find funds, and help make things work? In this case, we actually generated funds and helped the college in other ways. But also look at challenges facing in higher education landscape generally and ask, how do we be flexible? How can we transition to online if we have to? And how do we build ourselves to be nimble enough to do that and still deliver a high quality experience and engage and keep student affairs relevant, maybe more relevant than ever in these times? Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and joining you for SA Speaks. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your years and have a wonderful summer. See you in the fall, and thank you.